Namaskar. A warm welcome to World News and Indian Perspective on All India Radio. This is Pallavi Manchanda and with me is Saira Mujtaba, bringing glimpses of the major developments of the day from across the globe. Over the next half an hour, we shall bring you the latest from the world of politics, economy, sports, entertainment and more. First, the headlines. Nationwide protests held against Pakistan Foreign Minister's derogatory statement relating to Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Bengaluru hosts G20 First Framework meeting from 16th to 17th December. Union Territory of Ladakh to hold a G20 event in April next year. Death toll in China reaches alarming rate as health sector struggles to keep up with demands. Bangladesh Chief of Air Staff addresses newly commissioned IAF flight cadets. Death toll rises to 24 in the aftermath of Malaysian landslide. In T20 Cricket World Cup for blind, India defeats Bangladesh by 120 runs. In Chattogram Cricket Test, Bangladesh 272 for 6 at stumps against India on 4th day. And in hockey, India beats Spain by 1-0, earns promotion to Pro League 2022-24. The first Framework Working Group meeting of the finance track under G20 India presidency concluded in Bengaluru on Saturday. During the 2 days meeting, the member countries discussed the problem plaguing the global economy due to inflation and recession post-pandemic. Discussion focused on policies that promote strong, sustainable, balanced and inclusive growth across the world, particularly in the emerging economies. It also discussed issues pertaining to climate change and targets under energy transition. The discussion also revolved around macro policy tools to mitigate short-term and medium-term challenges. The working group will submit its report to the Union Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman on the priorities discussed during the first Finance and Central Bank Deputies meeting and first Framework Working Group meeting in Bengaluru. India has assumed the G20 presidency with an aim to secure global economic growth and prosperity. The G20 members represent more than 80% of the world's GDP, 75% of international trade and 60% of the world's population. It offers a strategic multilateral platform connecting the world's major developed and emerging economies. The CII Karnataka chairman Arjun Ranga has said that India's G20 presidency will help the country's development trajectory. Indian Union Territory Ladakh will host a G20 event in April 2023. India will host over 200 meetings in over 50 cities across 32 different work streams. This G20 meeting in Ladakh is a great opportunity for Ladakh to showcase its unique cultural and natural heritage and for global branding of the Union Territory of Ladakh. In the maiden meeting on G20 preparations, UT advisor Umang Narula suggested for a careful planning of Ladakh-centric narrative to promote the unique and varied culture, cuisine, art, dance forms with a focus on involvement of the youth, startups and entrepreneurs. He underlined the key element of People's G20 through various Jan Bhagidari initiatives under India's G20 presidency. Ladakh Divisional Commissioner and G20 Nodal Officer in Ladakh, Saugata Biswas, presented the action plan for the hosting of G20 delegations from tentative dates of 25th to 28th April next year, including security and logistics. In the run-up, the schools will organize Indian presidency's G20 themes, Vasudhaiv Kutumbakam, or One Earth, One Family, One Future in schools and colleges. Meeting also decided to promote the initiatives for carbon-neutral Ladakh, environmental-friendly living in UT, and to use e-vehicles during the event. Similarly, local-made items and innovative products shall be presented as souvenir items to the visitors. Ladakh Principal Secretaries Dr. Pawan Kotwal, Sanjeev Khirwar, ADGP Ladakh SS Khandare, and other senior officials also present in the meeting. In today's Hotspot section, we bring you a news commentary, External Affairs Minister's Deft Diplomacy at UNSC.
External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar played deft diplomacy at the United Nations during his recent visit to New York. Firstly, he unveiled a bust of Mahatma Gandhi at the United Nations building in New York that symbolizes India's perennial message of peace to the world. Secondly, he held wide-ranging talks with the Secretary General of the United Nations on critical global issues and challenges. Dr. Jaishankar gave a befitting reply to Pakistani provocation when Pak Foreign Minister Bilawal Bhutto Zardari yet again raised the Kashmir issue during an open debate on reformed multilateralism. The Indian External Affairs Minister reminded the UNSC that a country like Pakistan that hosted Al-Qaeda terrorist Osama bin Laden and was instrumental in the terror attacks on Indian Parliament by Pakistan-backed terror groups does not have the credential to preach to the members of the UN Security Council. Incidentally, it was the 13th of December in 2001 when India's parliament was attacked by Islamabad-backed and Pakistan-based Lashkar-e-Taiba and Jaish-e-Mohammed terror outfits. The External Affairs Minister also sent a strong message to China when he deplored the attempts to normalize terror threats in multilateral forums and said the question of justifying what the world regards as unacceptable should not even arise. It was not a hidden statement that clearly aimed at the repeated Chinese attempts to protect Pakistan-sponsored terrorists from sanctions in the UN Security Council and other forums. In a statement at the Global Counter-Terrorism Approach, Challenges and Way Forward, the External Affairs Minister stressed the growing potential for the misuse of new and emerging technologies by extremists, radicals and terrorists. Over the years, they have diversified their funding portfolio and expanded their recruitment toolkit. They exploit the anonymity afforded by new and emerging technologies, such as virtual currencies, for fundraising and finances. Terrorist groups have also been taking advantage of openness of democratic societies, spreading false narratives, inciting hatred, and radicalizing ideologies. We cannot let another 9/11 of New York or 26/11 of Mumbai happen again. In the last 2 decades, terrorism has been significantly countered and its justification delegitimized. Combating terrorism is a battle in which there is no respite. The world cannot afford attention deficits or tactical compromises. It is most of all for the Security Council to lead the global response in this regard. Dr. Jaishankar, who chaired the Norms or New Orientation for a Reformed Multilateral System debate in the UN Security Council, gave one of his best diplomatic performances when he boldly and passionately argued in favor of speedier action on expansion of the UN Security Council to reflect altered global realities as compared to the time when the United Nations was established. He emphasized that while the debate on the UN reform is decades old and has remained inconclusive, the world has radically changed. The External Affairs Minister said, "We see that in terms of economic prosperity, technology capabilities, political influence and developmental progress, the changes have rather been dramatic." He emphasized that the broad dispersal of capabilities and responsibilities has been expressed, for example, in the emergence of the G20. The reference to the G20 was significant as India happens to be the current president of the G20, whereas India's aspiration to be a permanent member of the UN Security Council stays unfulfilled, mainly because of lack of progress in reformation of multilateral bodies, including the UN Security Council. Dr. Jaishankar also drew attention to the rise of India and its rightful demand to be a permanent member of the UNSC by highlighting India's role in combating the COVID-19 pandemic world over by Dr. Jaishankar also drew attention to the rise of India and its rightful demand to be a permanent member of the UN Security Council by highlighting India's role in combating the COVID-19 pandemic the world over by donating and selling vaccines in large numbers to scores of countries around the world, underscoring the failure of current multilateral institutions to tackle contemporary global challenges emanating out of the pandemic and conflicts such as food, fertilizer and energy security. Dr. Jaishankar urged concrete action to bring about reforms. He lamented that 3 decades since the formation of the open-ended working group on UNSC reforms, we have nothing to show. The reasons for the slow progress are not difficult to find. While 4 permanent members of the UNSC have repeatedly supported UN reforms and an expanded Security Council with India as one of the new permanent members, China continues to be the odd member out to oppose it. Interestingly, while China does not openly oppose membership of India in the UN Security Council, it has no intention to work for UN reforms where countries such as India and Japan may be co-opted as permanent members of the UNSC. Pakistan amusingly supports expansion of the membership of the UN Security Council, but opposes the idea of increasing the number of permanent members in that body. External Affairs Minister Dr. Jaishankar has appropriately alerted the international community that the relevance and effectiveness of multilateral bodies, including the United Nations Security Council, can be enhanced only when they are adequately reformed to suit the political, economic, military and technological realities of the present-day world.
And now a special section on G20 under India's presidency. India took over the G20 presidency on 1st of December 2022 from Indonesia. Its term will end in November 2023. Since the beginning of its term as G20 president, India has geared up at various levels and stepped up its preparations as the nation prepares to host over 200 meetings during its term. And now let's have a look at the weekly round-off G20 key events under India's presidency.
Weekly roundup. The G20 in India deliberations for Sherpa track in Mumbai and for the finance track in Bengaluru were the highlights of the week. The participants were engaged in working out the agenda for the leaders of the group on key areas of global concern as they enjoyed the warmth and hospitality of Indian culture, cuisine and crafts. The week starting on 12 December witnessed a series of interactions in Mumbai. The occasion was G20 Development Working Group meeting to discuss developmental issues in developing countries, least developing nations and island nations. It provided a platform to the G20 member nations to come together and prioritize multilateralism, share solutions that promote growth, remap development plans and achieve the SDGs. During December 13 to 15th, the participants engaged in sessions on data for development, role of G20 in advancing the 2030 agenda, infusing new life into green development and accelerating progress on the sustainable development goals. Ahead of the meet, India's G20 Sherpa Amitabh Kant addressed a press conference in Mumbai on 12th December. He said the country's vision for the Development Working Group meeting is to share India's human-centric sustainable development goals story and citizen-centric governance.
We are meeting at a point of time when the world is in the midst of a turmoil. Global growth has slowed down. Vast number of people going below poverty line because of COVID. Over 100 million people have lost their jobs. 70 countries have been impacted by global debt. There's a huge crisis of climate finance and climate action. The global supply chains are disrupted. In the midst of all this, India has taken over the G20 presidency. Our belief is that every crisis is also a huge opportunity. Prime Minister has said that India's G20 leadership will be decisive, inclusive, will be action-oriented.
Delegates visiting Mumbai for the meeting were welcomed in traditional Maharashtrian style. Mumbai Municipal Corporation decorated the city with banners and posters welcoming the delegates and showcasing rich heritage of Maharashtra. G20 logo was on display at vantage points, including the iconic Gateway of India. India's G20 Chief Coordinator Harshvardhan Shringla spoke about the importance of G20 and India's cultural heritage.
What you're seeing in Mumbai really is a manifestation of that desire, that when G20 delegates come from the most influential countries from around the world, they see a face of India, which is the new India, which is a vibrant, dynamic, and an India which is ready to move forward. And I must give credit to the Maharashtra government and the Mumbai Municipal Corporation. They have really pulled out all the stops to make Mumbai a very welcoming and presentable destination.
Iconic building of the Taj Mahal Hotel of Colaba, where that unfortunate 26/11 attacks took place. Is there symbolism in choosing this destination?
Well, when we talk to all of our foreign friends, the issue of terrorism and the fact that Mumbai has been at the receiving end of international terrorism and cross-border terrorism, not only at 26/11 but even before that, the blasts on the trains and other parts of Mumbai, RBI and other places which were attacked, I think is something that is a telling story. We need to tell all of our international friends that terrorism has a extracted a price, and that the international community has to stand firm, and the G20 is considering in its agenda the issue of counterterrorism and the importance of the international community being united when it comes to fighting terrorism. Well, as you said, this is an iconic location. This is right on the westernmost tip of India. Mumbai is in many senses considered to be the gateway of India. It is the international face of India. So when delegates come here, this is where they see the intersection between India and the rest of the world. So as we engage the world, with greater and greater confidence today, I think it's important also to show them that this is where we start engaging the international community.
Delivering the welcome address on day one of the meeting, India's G20 Sherpa Amitabh Kant said India has taken up several initiatives. These include Data Governance Quality Index for ushering in good data governance ecosystem and use of data for transforming aspirational districts in the country. Union Minister of State for Electronics and IT, Rajiv Chandrasekhar, addressed the gathering and showcased India's achievements. He said India will soon begin to assemble large troves of anonymized data sets collected and harmonized under National Data Governance Framework policy. This will be done with a vast community of startups, researchers and AI ecosystem. Mr. Chandrasekhar said the digital economy should be viewed through a combined prism of trust and protection. Niti Aayog CEO Parameswaran Iyer made a presentation on Mission Life, or the lifestyle for environment. He said India's aim is to mobilize 1 billion people to take individual and collective action against climate change through 2022 till 2028. On day 2, discussions were focused on accelerating progress on sustainable development goals. In a video message, India's Foreign Secretary Vinay Mohan Kwatra highlighted India's responsibility as the voice of the Global South, one which represents accurately the multifaceted interests of the developing nations of the world. It was followed by India's Development Working Group co-chairs who outlined India's agenda, including the impact of current disruptions in food, energy and financial markets. Issues ranging from digital transformation, green transitions and women-led development came to the fore. The deliberations on the third and the final day underlined the importance of harnessing data for development and collective action on climate change. On the softer side, delegates visited Canary Caves on the outskirts of Mumbai to wrap up the Mumbai leg of the Development Working Group, which is one of the 13 working groups under G20 Sherpa. India's IT hub Bengaluru was the host city for the first meeting under the finance track of G20. The delegates from G20 member countries, invited nations and international organizations gathered at the G20 finance ministers and central bank deputies meeting, which began on 13 December. Karnataka Tourism Department laid out a red carpet for the international delegates from over 35 countries. Yakshagan and caparisoned elephants were the star attractions for the visitors. The guests were given a sneak peek into the tourist destinations and startups in the tech world of Karnataka. They enjoyed the excursion trips to Hampi as well. The G20 Finance Track meeting in Bengaluru discussed key issues of relevance for the global economy: the international financial architecture, infrastructure development and financing, sustainable finance, global health, international taxation, and financial sector issues, including financial inclusion, were high on the agenda. Building resilient, inclusive, and sustainable cities of tomorrow came up for discussion. A seminar on the role of central banks in green financing was also held. The discussions in the finance track will ultimately reflect in G20 leaders' declaration. Briefing media on 14 December, Secretary Department of Economic Affairs Ajay Seth told India's G20 finance track priorities for 2023 saw broad support from the member nations. Mr. Seth said these discussions will be taken forward at the working group level over the next 2 months. Over 160 delegates from 19 countries, along with European Union representatives and 17 international organizations such as IMF, WHO and ADB were present at the meeting. These discussions will pave the way for the first G20 finance ministers and central bank governors meeting, which will be held from 23rd to 25th February in Bengaluru.
Good evening to you and all of yours.
Happy day for Argentina. Mr. Banerjee, we have to go live to Bengaluru for the G20 Finance Track meeting that is currently underway in Bengaluru.
Will feed into the first G20 Finance Ministers and Central Bank Governors meeting in February 2023 at the same venue. The meeting was conducted over 2 days with the aim of seeking the views of G20 members on India's G20 Finance Tech priorities of 2023 across various work streams. Two side events on strengthening MDBs to address shared global challenges of the 21st century and the role of central banks in managing climate risk and green financing were also held on its sidelines.
That was a round-off of key events under India's presidency. And now in some more news, death tolls rise in China alarmingly as heiresses bearing the dead lined the driveway to a designated COVID-19 crematorium in the Chinese capital city of Beijing on Saturday, while workers at the funeral homes got busier than normal days after China reversed tight pandemic restrictions. Recently in Beijing, the spread of the highly transmissible Omicron variant has hit many different services, from catering to parcel deliveries. Funeral homes and crematoriums across the city of 22 million are also struggling to keep up with demand as more workers and drivers are testing positive for coronavirus. China is yet to officially report any COVID deaths since 7th of December. In Uttar Pradesh, large-scale protests were held across the state over Pakistan's Foreign Minister Bilawal Bhutto's remarks against Prime Minister Narendra Modi. The protesters held placards and staged protests in various districts, including Lucknow, Varanasi, Gorakhpur, Mahoba and Prayagraj. The protesters burnt the effigies of Bilawal Bhutto. They also demanded an apology for Bilawal's insensitive remarks.
Bangladesh Chief of Air Staff Sheikh Abdul Hanan on Saturday recalled the cooperation between India and Bangladesh in strengthening regional cooperation. He was addressing the newly commissioned flight cadets of Indian Air Force after reviewing the passing out parade at the Air Force Academy at Dindigul in Hyderabad. Mr. Hanan asked them to continuously upgrade in tune with the changing technology relating to warfare. He also highlighted historic occasion of Bangladesh Air Force taking birth on Indian soil. Earlier, he reviewed the passing out parade and presented wings to the passing out flight cadets. A landslide in Batang Kali, a popular hilly area about 50 km north of Kuala Lumpur, flattened the unlicensed campsite early on Friday while people slept in their tents. Those killed included 7 children. Rescue teams are still searching for survivors as they recovered the bodies of a woman and 2 children on Saturday, raising the death toll to 24. Of the 94 people caught in the slide, according to the Selangor State Fire and Rescue Department, State Fire and Rescue Chief Norazam Khamis said chances of more survivors being found were slim given the weight of mud pressing down on the site. Search and rescue operation resumed on Saturday after a halt overnight due to heavy rains the previous night. A total of 135 responders and 7 rescue dogs resumed scoring through thick mud and downed trees around 8:30 a.m. with the assistance of excavators, Norazam told reporters. An initial investigation showed an embankment of about 450 and covered an area of about an acre. Survivors are in stable condition and will also receive trauma counseling, said Health Minister Zaliha Mustafa. Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim said on Friday the government would provide $2 aid to families of every person killed, while survivor would receive 130 miles. 61 were safe and 9 still missing. 000 cubic meters of earth had collapsed. The earth fell from an estimated height of 30 meters, 100 feet, 0.4 hectares, 000 ringgit, 260 ringgit per household.
Bangladesh Railways BR has started its biggest recruitment process in recent times as the state-run rail transport agency is running short of manpower, hampering its services seriously, reported Daily Star. Bangladesh Railways has got the Railway Ministry's approval to recruit around 7,700 manpower under 17 categories in the first phase, and 295 people have already joined. The recruitment process for 1,451 others is almost completed. Currently, Bangladesh Railways is running with 50% of its approved manpower of 47,637. Operation of more than 100 stations and 99 trains, mostly locals, cannot resume mainly due to manpower shortage. The Bangladesh Railways has 361 trains in its fleet to operate on its 3,093 kilometer network.
but cannot run at least 99 of those, mostly for a lack of carriages and manpower, particularly loco masters and guards. And now in some sports news, in the 2022 T20 World Cup for the blind, India defeated Bangladesh by 120 runs in the finals in Bangalore to win an unprecedented third consecutive title. Batting first, India scored 277 runs in their 20 overs. In reply, Bangladesh were all out for 157 runs in their 20 overs. Australia, Bangladesh, Nepal, South Africa and Sri Lanka competed in the third edition of the competition, which was hosted by India. Men in Blue, who had previously won the title in 2012 and 2017, completed a hat-trick of wins by defeating Bangladesh in the final. In Chattogram Cricket Test, chasing a target of 513 runs, Bangladesh were 272 for 6 at stumps against India on the fourth day of the match. Bangladesh now needs 241 runs in 90 overs on day 5 of the match on Sunday. Opener Zakir Hasan scored a century, while his opening partner Najmul Hussain Shanto slammed 67 runs. Shakib Hasan on 40 and Mehendi Hasan on 9 were at the crease when the stumps were drawn for the day. For India, Akshar Patel took 3 wickets in Bangladesh's second innings, while Umesh Yadav, R. Ashwin and Kuldeep Yadav bagged a dismissal each. In hockey, the Indian hockey team beat Spain 1-0 in the Women's FIH Nations Cup 2022 finals today and earned themselves a place in the 2023-24 FIH Pro League. This was the inaugural season of the Women's FIH Nations Cup, with the promotion to next year's Women's Pro League hockey up for grabs for the winner. Gurjeet Kaur gave India the early lead and the Indian defence held on to the lead till the end. Pressure rose on Peru's fledgling government as 2 cabinet members resigned following deadly protests that have rocked the country since former President Pedro Castillo's removal from office and arrest last week. Education Minister Patricia Correa and Culture Minister Jair Perez announced their resignations, citing the deaths of individuals during the unrest. Protesters are demanding the release of ousted President Pedro Castillo, the resignation of his successor Dina Boluarte, and for fresh elections to be held. The protests continued on Friday, with key roads blockaded and airports forced to close. At least 17 people have been killed in the protests so far. The United Nations expressed deep concern over reports of deaths and detentions of minors involved in the demonstrations.
A quick look at the headlines once again. Nationwide protests held against Pakistan Foreign Minister's derogatory statement relating to Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Bengaluru hosts G20 First Framework Meeting from 16 to 17 December. Union Territory of Ladakh to hold a G20 event in April next year. Death toll in China reaches alarming rate as health sector struggles to keep up with demands. Bangladesh Chief of Air Staff addresses newly commissioned IAF flight cadets. Death toll rises to 24 in the aftermath of Malaysian landslide. In T20 Cricket World Cup for blind, India defeats Bangladesh by 120 runs. In Chattogram Cricket Test, Bangladesh 272 for 6 at stumps against India on 4th day. And in hockey, India beats Spain by 1-0, earns promotion to Pro League 2022-24. And now, before we end, let us listen to Mahatma Gandhi's favorite bhajan, Vaishnav Jan, by artists from Bhutan. And with that, we end this bulletin. We will be back at the same time tomorrow with the next edition of World News.